that leads me into what I would like to talk about this afternoon, is compassion for ourselves deepens as we get to know ourselves better. When we don't have mindfulness and we don't have awareness of how does the human psyche work, how does my body work, how does my mind work, we tend to live in what I call stories. We tend to have these stories about ourselves that just feed themselves over and over again. And what I mean by that is, after 35 years of being a therapist, I began to realize there's only really a handful of stories that we humans run over and over and over again. You know, and they are, I feel, misunderstood. Or I'm never misunderstood, or I'm never understood. I can't trust anybody. I'm unlovable, unworthy of love, unimportant, undeserving of the attention that I need. And we tend to run these stories over and over and over again in all the different scenarios that we run into in our life. And the reason is that these stories are what I call core beliefs. And when we develop a core belief that's based on a childhood, usually childhood response to a parent being neglectful or abusive or busy or not good with feelings or not good at listening, or a parent who's lost in their own ego habits and their own unconscious conditioning and their own, whatever they learned from their parents. We don't have the mental capacity as children to go, oh, well, mom is just really lost in a midlife depression, and I think I will get my needs and feelings met elsewhere until she comes out of it. I mean, we don't have that capacity as children, and so as children, we decide that nobody cares about my needs, or nobody cares about my feelings. Or when somebody promises, a parent or a caretaker promises, that we get to go to Disneyland for our birthday or whatever, and then they disappoint us, we think, oh, well, parents aren't trustworthy, people aren't trustworthy. And what happens is that core belief goes underground. And so we grow up as teenagers and then adults, and we have no idea that we're carrying a belief that nobody understands me, nobody's trustworthy, I'm unlovable, till we fall in love, till we get married, till we have an intimate relationship, and then it comes out in spades. And Hollywood doesn't tell us this. Hollywood doesn't say, by the way, 2 years after the romantic stage and the wonderful I'm in love and somebody really gets me stage, you are going to start acting out your unconscious childhood belief. But as a marriage and family therapist, I see it all the time, and I have to help couples kind of work down from the story they have in their head about their spouse to the feeling underneath the story, the fear or the hurt or the sadness or the shame, down to what is the core belief, and then to the point where they're each of them talking to each other about their core belief. Well, my feeling misunderstood is up, and it got triggered when you weren't listening to me, and now what I need is a hug, or now what I need is for you to say that you're listening and that you understand me. So when we begin to make these core beliefs conscious in our awareness, then we can begin to recognize at a deeper level, why am I having such a huge reaction to you saying that you're going on retreat for a month? Or to you saying that you need to move to Southern California and go to Brooks Institute? Or that you're unhappy and you want a divorce? That's an understandable reaction, but we tend to have huge reactions when this core belief gets triggered. And the thing about core beliefs is that they love to prove themselves right at the expense of your happiness, your health, your marriage, or love relationship. Core beliefs want one thing, and that is to prove themselves right again and again and again. See, I told you that you couldn't trust anybody, and here it is, they hurt you. I told you that you weren't lovable, and here it is, someone else leaving you. And so we without realizing it, and especially in relationship, we start acting out these core beliefs for a good ultimate reason, which is to heal them. But in the meantime, they run the show. And so it really behooves us, again, to practice inquiry and to begin to ask, well, what is the core belief underneath my huge reaction? Or what is the core belief that's triggering my behavior right now? Because there's so much information when we look at our repeated behavior, whether it's withdrawing, acting out and voicing, whether it's isolating, whatever we're doing, what is the core belief underneath here? We begin to get some really, really important information. And when we begin to identify the core belief, the good news is you can change it on a dime. As soon as you make it conscious, remember conscious choice from this morning, as soon as you make it conscious, it's like, well, I could keep telling myself that I'm unlovable or that nobody's trustworthy, or I could say, I'm willing to trust this person in this moment. I'm willing to believe that I can be understood in this moment. Always coming back to this moment where all the power is. Always in the present is the power. So as we begin to say a new belief to ourselves, what would I love to hear? Well, I'd love to hear that I'm lovable and that you love me and that I totally deserve loving compassion, and that I can trust what is true. I can trust life. One of my teachers, Gangaji, says, love is trustworthy. People are not. And when I first heard that, I thought, what? And then I realized, oh yes, how can people be 100% trustworthy? Because they're doing the same thing I am. They're moving in and out of conscious awareness. Conscious, unconscious habits. Conscious, unconscious habits. Conscious, unconscious habits. And so when someone that says they love us is acting unconsciously and acting out their anger or their resentment or their frustration or their fear, I can have compassion for them just as I have compassion for myself, because I recognize we're all in the soup together. We all move in and out of conscious awareness. We all struggle with fear and doubt, judgment and shame. We often all have a core belief that's motivating our reactions, our stories, and our feelings. So as we begin to kind of deepen our awareness and move underneath that story, we are able to identify what is going on under here. Because underneath the core belief is what I call core feelings. Now, core feelings are different than surface feelings. Surface feelings are irritable, frustrated, angry, resentful, jealous, guilt, doubt. Those are surface feelings. They all feed stories. At any moment during the day, you can say, what story now? What's the story happening now? And there's a story going. There's a story about how I should have said that differently, or they shouldn't have done that to me, or they should have said it, or that should have never happened, or this is how that should have happened. There's always a story going on in our ego mind of what, again, how it should have been different and better and more in my favor. But underneath the surface feelings, which just feed the story, there's 5 core feelings. One core feeling is hurt. I feel hurt. I feel hurt by what you said. I feel hurt by what you did. I feel hurt by not getting that job promotion. I feel hurt by losing my retirement, whatever it is. And often we jump over the core feeling into the core or into the story, into the secondary feeling, and boom, story. So if we back up and go below the story and say, what is the core feeling? Then I feel hurt, or I feel sad, or I feel scared, or I feel ashamed, or I feel joy. Joy is a core feeling. So once we can drop into the core feeling, we're able now to have a direct experience with whatever feeling got triggered. We no longer have to run away from any feeling, any, quote, negative feeling. Because now, with our new tool of compassion, we can bring compassion to the hurt. We can bring compassion to feeling scared. We can bring compassion to feeling ashamed. Ashamed for existing, ashamed for having needs, ashamed for voicing needs, whatever it might be. And what I've learned as a therapist and meditation student is that most of us live in the surface feeling of stories. But as we begin to ask questions and we say, well, what is the core belief? With curiosity, not with judgment. What is the core belief that's causing me to hide in my house, or talk myself out of my feelings, or resist relationship, or resist voicing my needs in relationship? What is the core feeling? As soon as we ask a question, we've accessed the incredible heart wisdom. But it takes a question. And then when we drop below that and say, well, what is the core feeling that's feeding this conflict with my spouse, or my teenager, or my best friend, or my boss? And then, again, when we ask the question, we drop down into the hurt, the fear, the sadness, the shame. And once we locate that feeling in the body, it becomes workable. It becomes manageable. No longer do we have to avoid sadness, or avoid fear, or avoid hurt, or try to jump out of those feelings, because what we're going to learn in a few minutes is that as soon as we locate any feeling in the body and breathe into it, any negative feeling disappears. Any positive feeling like joy, kindness, gratitude, compassion expands forever. And so the old ego habit of needing to avoid, quote, negative feelings and try to keep us in the story is no longer valid. We don't have to do that. And it actually keeps us away from being present, from being compassionate, from feeling our joy, from being fully present and aware and awake. And so as we begin to be present, really present with these questions and really bringing compassion to whatever is going on at a deeper level, we begin to feel more and more joy, more and more unlimited loving kindness, more and more compassion and equanimity, because that is who we are. That is who we are. You know, we tend to favor the story, the core belief story. We tend to favor that over who we really are. The unlimited compassion and loving kindness, joy and equanimity. We favor the story over and over and over again. We get lost in that for hours, days, years, favoring the story of being misunderstood, the story of being mistrusting, the story of being abandoned. I had this woman some years ago came into my office, and she came because she was feeling suicidal. She really thought she was going to hurt herself. And she's a sharp lady. She's, you know, worked for 25 years with her own business, and she was in a life transition where her twins had just gone off to college. Her husband's business reached a point where she didn't have to work anymore. She could stay home and do her artwork and her painting, and she was excited about that. But then when she was there, home alone by herself, she found all these thoughts coming up and fears coming up and anxiety coming up, anxiety that was freezing her, basically, where she couldn't do anything. She was just frozen. And so she came in and she said, "Carolyn, I feel so depressed, and I've been having thoughts about, you know, not wanting to live." And she said, "I'm really scared that I'm going to hurt myself." And I said, "Okay, well, let's just have you lie down and take some deep breaths in your belly, and let's just have you locate the depression in your body." She goes, No, you don't understand. I'm already really depressed, and I can't be more depressed. I don't want to feed it. I want to get rid of it. I said, "I know you do." So let's have you lie down and deep breathe and locate the depression in your body. And finally she agreed, because she was desperate and antidepressants hadn't worked. And so she laid on the futon in my office, and she began to deep breathe, and right away she began to cry. And then I said, "Now, where do you feel the depression in your body?" And she said, "Well, I kind of feel this heaviness in my heart, like there's a freight train sitting on my heart." And I said, "Okay, let's have you just deep breathe right into that heaviness." And again she said, no, I couldn't handle any more. I said, "I know, let's just have you breathe into it." And so she did. And as soon as she began to breathe into it, her chest began to lighten. And there was some more grief that she hadn't expressed about her twins leaving the nest and going to college. And there was some grief about her childhood that she had never addressed because she'd been so busy as a mom and a full-time worker and all that. And so she got through the grief, and then she said, wow, I don't feel depressed anymore. I said, really? We'll check around, see if there's any corners of it inside. She said, no, I feel much lighter. So I said, well, would you be willing to do this on your own? Would you be willing to go home, and as soon as you start to feel the depression, would you lie down on your bed and deep breathe and locate it and breathe into it? And she was like, well, yeah, maybe. But she did. She was willing to, and like I said, she was pretty desperate for any changes. And she came back a few weeks later and she said, wow, every time I did that, every time I locate the depression and breathe into it, it would disappear. I said, hallelujah. Isn't that great? And then she said, I just started feeling this joy that I haven't felt in years. This just joy for no reason at all, just for being alive. And then she said, I felt some anxiety yesterday about what happens if I do all these paintings and they never sell and I never make any money, and will my husband be angry, and I'm just wasting my time. And I said, well, that's an interesting thought. And she said, yeah, and so I laid down and I asked my body where I felt the anxiety, and I felt the tightness in my belly, and she said, so I just breathed into that, and then the anxiety disappeared. So she said, now I do it, whenever anything starts to come up, I just go lie down and start breathing. She didn't talk about doing herself in anymore. But I think in our culture we've been taught to be afraid of feelings, afraid of being a human being, afraid of growing despair or hopelessness or fear, or those things that we tend to run away from, or that ego wants to run away from. And yet, if we are willing to really be present and mindful and really directly experience what is true, even if the ego doesn't like it, even if there's some fear or anxiety, if we're willing to directly experience whatever is going on, then the tendency is for negative feelings to disappear and for positive to grow and expand and grow infinitely. And that is another conscious choice that we can make. Rather than being afraid of what feeling is visiting me today, we can consciously choose to be present and locate it and really surround it with loving compassion and breathe into it and allow even this to be present. So I wanted to just read a excerpt from my book, and then I want to give you an experience of this. When we focus directly on any negative feeling in our body, something phenomenal happens. When we locate fear in our body and breathe directly into it, allowing fear to release itself through trembling or crying or shaking, fear dissolves. Fear cannot withstand our direct attention. When we focus directly on sadness stuck in the body, we let grief take center stage for a few moments, and fully express itself. Afterward, it yields to spaciousness and peacefulness for no reason that will satisfy the ego. And once we get to know how hurt and rejection feel in our body, we witness pain as pain, not who we are, and hold this in tender compassion. When we courageously locate the shame that lives underneath fear and hurt and sadness, the shame for existing, shame for our shortcomings, shame for being molested or abused, shame for having and voicing our needs, and breathe directly into our shame, we hold even this in loving compassion. The more we bask in the unlimited joy and inner peace that compassion brings, we develop an appetite for freedom. Rather than dodge fear or sadness, we welcome the next feeling that will carry us into bliss and joy. Trembling, shaking, grieving, all become minor bumps in the road when peaceful freedom waits just around the corner. Each time we surrender ego's strategies, beliefs, and judgments that pretend to protect us from hurt, we come to trust our body's knowing to heal even more. So we're going to do a wonderful exercise now, and I want to invite everyone to gather behind the chairs in a circle. No, this is going to be the Constance, then be the Magnificat, yeah. And don't start it till after I give directions. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Do you want to record this part?
Yeah. Yeah. Handheld's okay. Walk that way with me. Okay. Now watch me spill it now. So what I want to invite you to do first is I want you to turn to your left or right and pick a partner. Is this on? Yes. Okay. And as you, with your partner, decide who's going to be A and B. Or if you can't decide, it could be the one with the longest hair this time. And A is going to teach B what your ego tends to do to hide yourself, to stop yourself from being vulnerable or transparent. So if you tend to be judgmental, you teach your partner how to be judgmental. If you tend to doubt yourself a lot, you teach your partner how to create self-doubt and what that sounds like in your head, what it feels like in your body. Let it be a whole body experience. If you tend to compare yourself a lot, if ego does that, you teach them how to compare. So you basically make your ego habit more conscious by exaggerating it and teaching your partner how to do it. And let it be a full body experience. For example, if my ego tends to have the core belief of mistrust, then that body language might be, that I kind of keep to myself and don't connect with people, and keep a story going in my head about how I can't trust people, and just keep it really light. Hi, how are you, on the surface, and so that there's a character inside you that really perpetuates the story that you have going, the core belief that you have going, and how it comes out unconsciously. And most of our behaviors are unconscious. So you'll have 3 minutes to teach your partner how to do your particular core belief and ego habit. Ready, set, go.
I don't really know exactly what to tell you to do. I'm just explaining it to him, or I'm actually having
Yeah,
him do
what are the thoughts that go with your